Daar is Bergen.
Persie, ja!
Daar is hij. Ja!
Daar is Klaassen, goal!
It's podcast 47 from Football-Oranje, your home of Dutch football. You're listening to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes or Football Nation Radio. I'm Michael Statham and I'm joined by Michael Bell and James Rowe to discuss the latest news in the Eredivisie as well as answer all of your Twitter questions sent in to us. Enjoy. Mike, James, let's start talking about the Eredivisie title race. It's getting more and more interesting by the week and it's so much more unpredictable as well. And let's start our podcast with a question. Abdul sent this in on Twitter. What's the reason that PSV have started to drop points when there's only the Eredivisie title left to fight for this season? And I suppose you guys, it's not just PSV that have been dropping points. Ajax have too. Why?
I think for me, when it comes to PSV, it seems some of the players have become a bit complacent. If you look at the weekend, the first half, the defence was all over the place. And going forward, they weren't playing as a team, especially Hirving Lozano. I saw it described after the game that someone said that he was playing like he was trying to make compilations of himself on YouTube. Tried to do everything himself, not passing to his teammates, taking shots. I think Mark van Bommel did exactly what he should have done, which was hooked him off at half time. Same with Gaston Pereiro, if they're not playing well, get him off. Doesn't matter that he scored the goal, get the fresh legs on and drum it into these players that if they're not going to perform, they're not going to play. And Hirving Lozano is, obviously a key man for them and they'll need him for the game against Feyenoord on Sunday, but you need to drum it into him that this title race isn't over. And especially now that they've dropped points in 2 games, Ajax is right behind them. If it's only 4 points, if Ajax beat them at the end of March, then it's only 1 point in it gets a bit nervy. So PSV have Feyenoord, Excelsior away, and then NEC at home, and VVV away before they head to Amsterdam. That's 4 must-win games for them now before they set up in Amsterdam. So I think these players just need to get their heads straight and get back to focusing on getting the victories.
I think energy levels will play a part because Mark van Bommel was so demanding, and like Mike says with his substitutions, showing that he's the boss, showing that he's the manager, and hooking players that are not really playing for the team or a team ethic in certain games. I think what must also not be forgotten is traditionally Utrecht away and Heerenveen away can be potential banana skins, and that's also something that mustn't be forgotten. And but from my point of view, to answer this question, I think his energy levels because of the demanding manager. But it's only 4 points. There are 12 games to go. Many a twist and turn ahead. Yes, the game in Amsterdam at the end of March may well prove decisive, but it's what happens up until that, and then immediately afterwards. Because you've got teams that are fighting against relegation. You've got teams that want to get into the European playoffs. So everyone will have something to play for, and that's always been the kind of mantra of the Eredivisie itself. That it's never really done and dusted until it's done and dusted. So I think this will go to the wire, and it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens in the weeks ahead.
I thought it was quite telling how Hirving Lozano was pulled off at half-time in PSV's 2-2 draw at Heerenveen. The fact that Mark van Bommel wasn't afraid to make that decision and play Kodiak Gakpo, and then also to bring on Moe Hatada in place of Gaston Pereira, and that just shows, I think, the difference perhaps between PSV and Ajax, that PSV will have that dip in form. Every team does. Every team makes mistakes. Every team will drop points, but it's how they're going to recover from that now. Are PSV over that? Is that 2-2 comeback going to be the end of that dip in form they had? It's not going to be the last point to drop this season, that's for sure, but will they go back to those winning ways and that almost imperious form that we saw before? Because Ajax have been dropping points too, but I think, as I said, the telling difference will be the difference between Mark van Bommel and Erik ten Hag, how they can both deal with it. And a really interesting comment in the week came from Dutch media about how Mark van Bommel comes across as the boss, whereas Erik ten Hag is not, and that's what will make the difference in this season's title race. What do you two think?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Pierre van Hooijdonk said about that, and even Raphael van der Vaart agreed with it. And I think we'll see what happens on Sunday. If PSV are lethargic against Feyenoord, the message hasn't got across, but if they come out Feyenoord look really weak at the moment. It could be a battering from PSV. If the message got across from Van Bommel right, PSV should come flying out the box on Sunday and really go for the juggernaut and try and get a big win on Sunday. If they do, then you can see them flying with confidence into 3 pretty easy and winnable games before they head to Amsterdam.
I think the priorities as well of the two clubs, you can draw a parallel in this instance. That Ten Hag it was made aware to him that it's not just about going for the title, it's also about making progress in Europe. And I'm not saying that Van Bommel didn't have the same objective set to him by PSV, but in the case of Ajax, they made it quite clear to Ten Hag that it's not just a case of getting through to the Champions League qualifiers and participating in the group. We want to go as far as we possibly can. And I think it's a parallel of the two, what goes on behind the scenes at both clubs. One is traditionally more geared to European success, while the other one is very much, domestic. I wouldn't say dominance, but domestic priorities, and then seeing what they can do in Europe, for example. But I think a valid point in that respect. But many a twist and turn ahead. But I think from my point of view, being here in Amsterdam as well, Ten Hag is under pressure. Should Ajax not win this Eredivisie title, it's 5 years without a title, and the natives are getting restless, as they say here. So pressure on for both, but in particularly Ten Hag, I believe.
We saw that Frenkie de Jong had a bit of a wobble in form ever since his confirmed transfer to Barcelona, and I just wonder whether transfer rumours, even this early stage, it's only February, but having just had the January transfer window, could transfer rumours be affecting some of the players, particularly PSV, on the evidence of de Jong's fall in form? Jordan asked a question and he said which PSV players could be way out of the club in this summer, and could Marco van Ginkel return to Eindhoven on a permanent deal? That question comes into the fact that are some of these players that could be leaving PSV, which ones will be on their way, and has that been affecting their form?
Yeah, I think if you look at Hirving Lozano and Steven Bergwijn are two that the Dutch media are getting right behind and saying that all the big clubs in Europe are following them, and you've got to say maybe their heads are turned. I think Bergwijn's performances haven't really dipped. He was unlucky against Heerenveen. He had a shot that canned right back off the post, but he was their main creative threat. With Lozano, I think his head maybe has been turned. I could definitely see them two going. And then in case of Van Ginkel, I'd love to see him back at PSV. He was great for them the past 2 years, and it's important that he gets regular football. There's some talk that he might be back for the end of the season, but I can't see him getting into that Chelsea side at the moment. So it's his next move is going to be crucial, and I think move back to PSV in the summer to replace. They'll have the money from Bergwijn, Lozano, and probably Gaston Pereiro. I think those three will definitely leave, and I think Van Ginkel would be a great fan appeasing signing for them.
I think for him, Van Ginkel, I think would be a fantastic move. He was on red hot form last time out, but he played for PSV, and was a big being captain and playing a big role in their title success as well. I think Dumfries will go. I think the clubs have seen the progression that he's made at such a young age. The fact that he doesn't look out of place at international level already, and he only debuted last November. And considering that right backs as competent as what he is are quite rare to find, I think a club will go in for him. Lozano stated on the eve of the season starting that he highly expects this to be his last season in Eindhoven, due to the fact that it's important for him, for his family, to be as familiar and comfortable off the pitch as possible. Hence why a move to Spain is linked. And I think Gaston Pereiro as well. He's been around in Eindhoven for a long time, and I think they may also take heart from the move of Sergio Arias. He spent time at PSV and went on to one of the best clubs in Europe in Atletico. So there's always the expectation and the hope that you don't necessarily have to go to a middle of the road league from the Netherlands. You don't always have to go a step in between. If you work hard enough, the rewards can be quite big. As regards to Bergwijn, I don't know if it's in his best interest to maybe have one final season here. And I'll give you an example. When Depay was instrumental in PSV winning the league and went from here to for Netherlands to Manchester United. He was at the heart of everything they did. Every single goal, every single creative outlet appeared to be from him. And I think if Bergwijn could replicate such an important role player-wise, then I think he'd have the pick of the clubs in comparison to if he was to go now, and you don't want him ending up on a bench somewhere and not playing as much.
I think Jurgen Zut as well is another person that will be leaving PSV this summer. But he's been around for so long, and he's been rumoured to leave for a few years now, but he hasn't quite managed to do that. And because he seems to be quite settled with PSV and it's helping him get into the Dutch national team, something which I think Denzel Dumfries should take a note of. The fact that, yes, I think particularly if he plays well in the Nations League semi-final or final this summer, that he will get suitors coming in for him, bigger clubs that want his signature. But I think he's better off staying at PSV. Santiago Arias, as you pointed out, James, is a good example of that if he could stay in Eindhoven, he will get a big move one day. Why rush into it when he can be that regular player with PSV, win silverware and play for the Dutch national team regularly? Another question related to transfers in the summer is from Cam, and he wants to know about who we think will have a better career out of Matthijs de Ligt or Frenkie de Jong, which is a brilliant question to ask. And I guess that depends on what kind of aspects you're comparing them on. You compare them on how much money they'd like to earn in their career, silverware, caps for the Dutch national team. But let's get the opinions of James and Mike.
I think for me, if you look at the two of them, I think Frenkie de Jong is going to, arguably the biggest club in the world, and if he established himself there, he could be there for the rest of his career, become a fan favourite in Barcelona, and become, one of these players that have the esteem of Sergio Busquets in that level. De Ligt, I see him as a future Netherlands captain. I see him as a record cap holder. I think he's going to be that instrumental, and I can see him going to one of the biggest clubs in the world as well. It's difficult to pick. I hope they both have the same career, because I hope they both lead Netherlands to a World Cup win. And then we're talking about the two of them being greats for Netherlands going forward. But I think De Ligt, in the position he plays and the way he plays that, the age he is, he's 2 years younger, I think he's going to go on to break records. Whereas I think Frenkie de Jong is going to have a great career, but I don't think it's going to be record breaking.
I agree. I think Matthijs de Ligt, the maturity to show at this age is this kind of player, and young player in particular, comes along once in a generation, especially in his position. And as someone who's watched him play since he broke through, even not just on the pitch, cajoling fellow teammates that are older and more experienced, having the guts to come out and speak to the Dutch press after difficult results, for example, away to Feyenoord recently, and to hear him speak, you think, well, it can't be a kid of 19 speaking like that, but it is. And his awareness as well, his awareness of everything around him, and is so assured as well. I think I agree with Mike. I think he will go on to become the record cap holder, and also hopefully captain. And I think as well he's going to choose very wisely. I mean, he's linked to every. There's a saying here in the Netherlands. When something happens a lot, you're linked. In this case, he's linked from every club from here to Tokyo, and he can choose whatever he wants. And I'm certain that he'll surprise with his next choice of club. And I think with De Jong, again, I think De Jong will be pivotal for his next club, and it'll be interesting to see also in his position of midfield how often he'll be called upon, not just by current Barcelona managers, but maybe even future Barcelona managers, and the club being the way it is, from 1 minute veering towards La Masia and the next minute going out and buying the best young players in the world. So you've got to try to find a happy medium. But I think with De Ligt, he's already within 2 years put his stamp down as to who he is and what he is, and he's smart enough to know what's the most difficult stages are yet to come. He's got good people around him, so I think De Ligt will have the better career in that respect. But I'm also convinced that De Jong will have a career that he can look back on and be very proud of too.
I like questions like this because no one in 20 years' time is going to come back and haunt us about what we said.
You never know. Could be on TV by then.
Oh yeah, we'll all be really famous. No, Matthijs de Ligt, he will, I think, have the better career. I think one of you mentioned this already just now, that the position he plays in does help that. He will become that monumental centre-back. I think another difference between the two of them is that de Ligt is currently younger as well. De Jong can still develop, but de Ligt can do so even more. And I think at the hands of someone who is an experienced centre-back, he can go on to become one of the greatest centre-backs that has ever been in football. And that is not in any way talking down Frenkie de Jong, but I just think that de Ligt will become an ultimate. James, you're an Arsenal fan. Let me get your opinion on this. So de Ligt this week has been linked with Arsenal. Is there any truth to the rumours? And if it is true, can he succeed at Arsenal?
Well, he'd walk into our back line, I'll tell you that now. I've watched Arsenal play live 7 times this year, and the crux of our defence is nobody can communicate. They all seem to use sign language. De Ligt, with his qualities of wanting to cajole fellow teammates, organise that back line, talk and smell danger and snuff it out, is something Arsenal's back line sorely miss. As regards to the link, I think it's quite tenuous. I don't know if it's clickbait completely, but one thing I am convinced about is that I think de Ligt is mature enough to give every club that seriously goes in for him the time of day. I don't think he's made up of, for example, qualities where he'll say, I don't want to play for them. I think he'll look at the bigger picture and give every single club the time of day and make the right decision for him. And I've been saying for quite some time now, I'm convinced that he will surprise with his next choice of club. I'm not saying it's going to be Arsenal, but I don't also think it's going to be a club where necessarily everybody expected. Like, for example, Bayern Munich are not being talked of as much as a potential suitor. Only Rafael van der Vaart, when he was asked where should Matthijs de Ligt go, he stated Bayern Munich, which I thought was a very interesting and very honest opinion. But the links to Arsenal, lots of Arsenal fans on Twitter have been with their DMs and trying to get information. But I think it's, a lot of people look on YouTube, but we know ourselves, the three of us, having watched him for such a long time, and in my case, been very lucky to watch him live since he first broke through and see his progression. The world is at his feet, and it would be very nice for him to sign for Arsenal. He wouldn't even have to change colour of kit. He can carry on staying in red and white if he wishes. But it would be a wonderful move for Arsenal, but I think it's unlikely, in all honesty.
Okay. Another question we had this week also relates to Arsenal and Ajax, from Klaas, and he says, were Mark Overmars to join Arsenal as a director of football, how do you think? Who do you think should take his place as Ajax's director of football?
There's a question. I think because Overmars has been so comfortable in that role, and still is so comfortable in that role. And my first and honest opinions about it is I don't think he's going to leave. And I know that Arsenal are looking at Monchi and looking at Overmars. I hope he chooses. I hope Arsenal choose Monchi. Nothing against Overmars; he's done a sterling job, particularly in a selling sense. But Monchi's worked with Emery, and this is a project with a manager that we have, which I have no wish to dispose of whatsoever. Hence why my preference goes there. But very interesting, Overmars when he took the job, that come out of nowhere. So you don't necessarily know if it's going to be a former player for the club. You don't know if it's going to be, like, for example, years ago when Ajax was sponsored by ABN AMRO, they had people in that role that had previous experience in the banking sector. You don't know if they're going to go back in those kind of walks of life kind of thing. So it's a very difficult question in terms of giving potential names, but I think the first thing you have to do is wait and see if he does move, and then see all the names that will follow him from there.
I think a couple of names you could mention would be, Wim Jonk left under difficult circumstances a couple of years ago. After falling out, if Overmars goes, maybe he'll come back into the fold. And you got to look at the job that Max Huberts is doing at AZ Alkmaar at the moment. I think PSV were a rumoured destination after Marcel Brands left. and I think if Overmars does go, then his name will pop up again. He's doing an absolutely amazing job at AZ Alkmaar, and I think he should maybe look to progress his career a little by going to Ajax, because I think he'd do a fantastic job there as well.
Okay. Well, thank you both for talking about PSV and Ajax. Let's move on to talking about Feyenoord. It's been a tumultuous time for the Rotterdam club. This news has long been known about Jovan Bronckhorst leaving in the summer, but there are loads of poor results, and fans are now being ridiculed almost for clinging on to those memories of a 6-2 win over Ajax after some really poor performances against teams lower down the table. What do you both make of the mess at Feyenoord at the moment? And I think it is a mess. I think it's fair to say that, because even though they're still sitting in third place, it's looking like another season where they have to cling on to third place before they can fall down even further down the table and potentially miss out on European football altogether.
Yeah, for me, I've been saying all season that everything at the club is just stale. They've got stale players, the management was stale. There needs to be a clear out in the summer. Van Bronckhorst gone, somebody needs to come in that's going to overhaul the whole playing squad. They've got so many talented youngsters coming through, but they just don't get a chance because there's players like Trinstra and Jordi Klaas's come back, and you've got Jorgensen up front stinking the place up. For me, I feel a bit sorry for Van Persie, because this is his last few months in professional football, and he's going to have to, if Feyenoord don't progress in the cup, then it's going to be quite a sad way to go out with no trophies and fighting for third place in the league, so many points behind Ajax and PSV. And right now, if you look at the two teams battling for third, you've got to say that AZ Alkmaar are the favourites, because they look red hot, 5 wins out of 5, whereas Feyenoord look an absolute mess. Groningen only won 1-0 at the weekend. It could easily have been more. They absolutely battered Feyenoord, who looked hopeless. So I just need to hope that in the summer that someone comes in that has a lot of ideas of overhauling that squad, get rid of some of the deadwood in there, and then build using the great youngsters that are coming through and give them a chance. Yeah,
because that defence is pretty all over the place at the moment. That 1-0 defeat to Groningen, that they could have exceeded many, many more goals. And there were misplaced passes to Kenneth Vermeer, who was constantly flinging all over the place because of some poor passes back to him. There was really poor attacking play from the fullbacks, and the midfield was hardly protecting the back four. But there's mistakes all over the place. Is it just a lack of concentration or what?
For me personally, the tone was set when they got knocked out of the Europa League. When they got knocked out of the Europa League by Trentin before the season has started, they qualified for Europe, and automatically they're thinking about group stages and planning big games and that kind of thing. And they've got a difficult qualifying round to get through, and they were put to the sword by Trentin, and it was kind of a bit of a shock to the system. Also losing on the opening day away to the Graafschap as well. It kind of sets the tone, and I think their decision to announce Van Bronckhorst so early. I mean, it was announced with quite a fair bit of the season still to go, and I don't know if that plays a role where players are thinking, oh well, he's leaving now, I don't really have to pull up any trees or do anything special. But from the board's point of view, I think they've got to get the right decision. They've got to make the right decision. I mean, the links of Derek Kuyt, for example, and even from a foreign sense, I've heard the name of Van Hazenbroek, who used to manage Genk, I believe. He's been linked with it as well. But they've got to make the right decision, because they've got to build to a new stadium, a new era, and as you say, they've got many good young players in that squad that can be pushed on, and be very interesting to see who they select.
You also got to look at someone like Steven Berghuis as well. Like last season, he was so good. He was getting into the Netherlands squad. He was getting linked to clubs. This season, he's just been an absolute shadow of himself. You got players like this. Obviously, maybe they were playing last season for a move. Tony Vilhena as well. That just didn't come around, and maybe they're just a bit demoralised this season. I think the whole club is in just a bit of a sad state at the moment.
Well, AZ Alkmaar, they found themselves in some pretty poor form. Some actually quite out of character performances. And they had lost some key players in the summer, but what makes them so refreshed at the moment and a completely different side to Feyenoord, because they're succeeding very much so, and they've on a run of 6 wins, 18 goals scored, non-conceded since the winter break, and a Dutch Cup semi-final to look forward to. What's the difference between these two clubs at the minute?
If I can start with that one, I think the opposite effect, that Van der Brom has announced he's leaving after 5 years and they want to send him out in style. And I think that's the opposite effect of maybe announcing too early that Van Bronckhorst is leaving. I mean, I said Alkmaar invested heavily in youth in recent years, and it's really starting to reap the benefits. And they're becoming really, really structured. And Mike made a great point about the technical director, Max Halberts, with his way of going about his business and streamlining everything, which is really proving the benefit. But I think, coupled with players coming to the fore and wanting to send John van der Brom off in style, I think they've just kind of propelled where it's given them a little bit of more of impetus, really. And they've got a cup semi-final to look forward to in Tilburg against Willem II. But my prediction on that is I think that Willem II will go on to play their first Dutch Cup final in, I believe, 14 years.
For me, it's interesting about AZ is, I love Calvin Stengs. I think he's a great young player. I think he's heading to the top and he's been in great form. But one of the big players that's really turned it around since the new year has been Adam Meyer. He left PSV after 3 or 4 years of not really becoming the player that everyone thought he was going to be when he first broke through at AZ. And, he had that really disappointing spell in Turkey that then came back and went down with Twente last year and, was looking for a club, and then AZ offered him a training stage, and at the start of the season he wasn't really in the team, but now you've got to say he's probably their most creative player, and he's really back to being what we thought he was going to be, a number 10 that's creating chances over the pitch. And the players that are benefiting from it are the likes of Stengs and Till, who was really poor at the start of the season. So I think with Idrissi and Stengs up front, with Till behind him, they've got 3 great youngsters who can score goals, and with Meyer pulling the strings behind him, I think they've just got a squad that's really on top form at the moment, and it's nice to see. But the job for AZ is, can they keep these players going into next season, which is their biggest problem, because as soon as they get someone that does start performing, then they get picked off. So whereas like the Stengs, Idrissi, Till, are they all still going to be there to start next season under a new coach?
I think so. I think a lot of their first team players will stay, at least for another year, just because of how they started the season. I think it's given them that bit of perspective that they didn't have last season, where they thought they were a runaway team, and someone such as Joost Till perhaps was a little bit overconfident starting the season, thinking it'd be maybe quite easy being captain one more year. But now I think he realises the work he's having to put in and having to redo it again with different players around him. And I think it's important that he stays next season for the new manager to come in and be settled and have these first team players that will score lots of goals. I think RZ's problem looking forward is their defence. It's certainly settled down and they have had loads more clean sheets. Marco Bizot's back into some form in goal. But also the centre-backs. Ron Vlaar is getting on a bit, and his partner centre-back is either Tern Koopmeiners, who's a midfielder by trade, or Pantelis Hatzidiakos, who it's a bit harsh to say, but I don't think he's going to be cut out for RZ's level in the future. So that's something they could certainly improve on, but these players need to solidify their place in the Dutch national team before they can think about a move going ahead. And it would be nice for RZ to have one of those rare seasons where they have a lot of players reaching their prime, young players that are really looking to impress in the Netherlands, but doing it with RZ and having a sort of title push next season if that's possible for them. It was brought about the Dutch Cup semi-final, and I think that's vital to RZ's season, much as it is for Feyenoord. And I think you'll end up seeing that it could well be a Feyenoord RZ final. And if it was Ajax RZ, I would still tip RZ to win the final. Obviously very difficult to say at this stage, but it's interesting how James is saying that it'll be Willem II that reach the final. But yeah, the form guide will suggest that RZ will get there, but we'll after the winter break especially, we've seen plenty of surprises enough to know that won't be the case necessarily.
I just think with home advantage as well, winning away in Utrecht is no easy feat, and they have improved since the winter break, and they have good players with the likes of Dankelau and Fernando Lewis, and in particular as well Danny Crowley. You know, Lewis Baker came to the Netherlands on loan and played a massive part in winning the first ever trophy in the history of Vitesse. And Crowley could again be another Englishman who in recent years goes on to have domestic success with his new club. And I just think with home advantage, I think it's going to see them over the line. I was at Ajax Willem II last November in the league, and the Willem II fans in the away section of the Johan Cruyff Arena were absolutely tremendous. They were one of the best domestic fans I've seen in a while here. They didn't shut up for 90 minutes, and you imagine that with a home advantage going into semi-final with a chance of a cup final for the first time in 14 years. It's a hell of a motivation for everybody, and I think that's what will see them over the line.
For me, I've got a rather selfish look at it, that I want the team that wins the trophy to be capable of doing something in Europe next season, just because of the Dutch coefficient the way it is, and hopefully we can get 11th place ahead of Austria. But if we don't, then next year is going to be another big year for the country, and I think this AZ side could do something in Europe. I think obviously Ajax and Feyenoord, you're looking at getting in there. If Willem II got there and won it, yeah, it's great for them. It's great to see another side winning a trophy, but you want to see a side that's capable of going into the Europa League group stages, and I think AZ or Feyenoord would be the best ones to get to that final, and it'll be in the name in the hat for Netherlands next season, which is important to me.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. Something that I'd forgotten about, and I do agree that should AZ win the cup, I think they do a great job in Europe if they can keep their best players and also have a manager who's experienced playing European football before, especially if it's with a Dutch club as well. I just wanted to make a point about Vitesse, because we spoke briefly there about English players that have come to the Netherlands and done really well in a new country, and someone that I really like to pick out is Max Clark, the Vitesse left back, because I think he's come back from the winter break and he's had a tremendous start to the second half of the season. It hasn't been perfect, but I think you could see that when he scored that goal against Willem II at the weekend, that he just was so delighted and he just looked so pleased himself to score his first goal for his new club, and he's making great strides in the left back position for Vitesse. And it's a bold move for a player to leave Hull City, where he probably could have had a great season this season with Hull, but he's decided to go to Vitesse and forge a career in another country, and he's doing very well so far.
The Netherlands has also been a happy hunting ground for young players in recent years. I mean, you think of not only Lewis Baker, for example. Danny Crowley is coming here. His name escapes me. He's now on loan at Derby, and he was also at Mason Mount. That's the one. He had a tremendous effect, and I think British players in particular now, not just Europe, but also particularly the Netherlands, they can make a really positive impact, not just for their clubs, but they can also make progression for themselves. I mean, I've been banging the drum for British footballers to go abroad as much as they possibly can, and I think a lot of British players, especially ones that have come here, the likes of Lewis Baker, Mason Mount, Danny Crowley, and now Max Clark, they're realising that they can make progression quite quickly. And it's also a big challenge. It's a big challenge. You could stay, like you say, you can stay at Hull if you want to, but to come and, like in the case of Lewis Baker has gone down in history at Vitesse because he was a huge part of the team that won their first major honour in the club's history. And if it wasn't for him, they might not have reached the final when they beat Sparta Rotterdam. So it's fans don't forget these kind of things. And yes, the money and the riches of the Premier League must be very tempting, but to make progression on an individual playing sense, and to find a new culture and to be loved by fans for really trying your heart out and being appreciated is something I think players can also appreciate.
Yeah, I think you see what's happening in Germany with all the English players going over there. I think Netherlands has to continue that link. I don't think it's gone very well for NAC Breda this season. I don't think they've been able to get the players that they wanted, and the Vitesse and Chelsea link seems to have gone away this season. It's be interesting to see if it comes back next summer. But I think James is right. I think British players need to look abroad a bit more. I think the Premier League is becoming that so focused on money that these young players aren't going to get a chance anymore. And the Netherlands, along with Germany, is the place that they should be looking at, because they're going to get time. They're going to get game time for some of these clubs. And if they're good enough, they'll play. And if they showcase their talents in a league like the Eredivisie, then who's to say how far they can go in their career?
Yeah, I think it's something very, very interesting going ahead, because as Mike says about the money in the Premier League, and even my club, I've been an Arsenal fan for 30 years, but I support a club in a back line that comes from Spain, France, Czech Republic, Germany, and they can't communicate. And it can be frustrating for supporters, whereas here in the Netherlands, players arrive from Britain. English is the second language of the Netherlands. They can be understood, they can talk, and they can learn the local language as well and integrate even better. And it's I'd like to champion, along with not just, as Mike says, the Netherlands and Germany, but I think in future Spain, France and Italy should also be looked at as potential destinations.
Yeah, and I think again next season you'll see even more English players coming across, and hopefully not just on loans, hopefully some more on permanent bases. And Mike, there you mentioned about NAC Breda are struggling, and they definitely are. Let's look down that bottom end of the table, and it's shocking to see that only 3 points separate 9th place Groningen down to 16th placed Emmen. Of course, the bottom 3 are the danger zone in the Netherlands. 16th and 17th are the relegation playoffs, and 18th is the only direct relegation place, which at the moment looks as though it's a tie between NAC and De Graafschap for that bottom position. James, Mike, what have you made of this relegation battle this season? It's going to be very tight, and I don't think any of us could really pick out for sure all 3 teams that might end up getting into trouble. But we spoke about NAC there briefly. Let's delve into them a little bit more. Why have they struggled so much this season, considering they have the new manager, considering they have a great home fan base that normally gets some results? Why have they struggled so much?
I think player recruitment, I think that could have been better. And behind the scenes as well, I think the technical director, I think he resigned earlier on in the season, and I don't think his position has been filled. There was so much positivity regarding the Mitchell van der Graaf appointment. I mean, he himself said, this is a team that needs to push on to try to qualify for Europe, and with the wonders that he did at Excelsior, you wouldn't have bet him against him with a bigger budget. Doing a very good job with NAC Breda. When I spoke to Fabian Spokeskleder when I interviewed him last season, and he was telling me about the when there was full steam ahead to stay up, they all believed and they all fought for one another, and there was a real brotherhood there. I don't think that's there this time around, and I think it's a little bit splintered. I can't see NAC Breda getting relegated automatically. I think they will finish in the relegation playoffs, and then, as we know, the relegation playoffs are a lottery because of the quality of the Keukenkampioen First Division as well. We know ourselves, for all our experience through the years with the 3 of us, that relegation always does seem to go to the final day, and as minute as it sounds, in the case of Sparta Rotterdam a couple of years ago, when they went away to go ahead on the last day of the season and won to stay up, your fixture on the last day can also be decisive, because I think Sparta Rotterdam that season, when they stayed up, if they'd have gone to any other ground in the country, they wouldn't have stayed up, but they had the, I say, luck in inverted commas of going to the weakest team in the country whose heads were already down, so it was important, so it was easier for them to get the win. I think this relegation will go to the final day, and it could even go down to goal difference. It could be that tight.
Yeah, I think I said at the start of the season, there's a lot of average teams in the Eredivisie this season, and I think we're seeing it now that anybody can beat anybody. FC Emmen come up first Eredivisie season. They're feeling great. They can win at home against anyone around them. And then you see a team like Heerenveen, who can hold PSV to a draw, can hold Ajax to a 4-4 draw. They've got players like Sam Lammers, who everyone's debating if he's going to be the starting striker of PSV next season. And they're only above the drop zone on goal difference at the moment. I agree, I think it's going to go down to the wire. I think NAC and the Graafschap, one of them is going to finish bottom. You know, you think NAC Breda have enough going forward that they should be able to get a couple of wins going. You saw them at Ajax at the weekend. You know, they got thumped in the end, but the first half they caused problems. You know, they got Castanier and Ross Hoovel up front. They've got pace. Tavreda's he's a good striker for a sort of bottom of the table Eredivisie club. You think they had to have a manager to be able to turn it around. So I think I agreed. I think they'll finish 17th. I think the Graafschap will go straight down. Then you got to pick one of 6 or 7 clubs who's going to have a rotten run between now and the end of the season. You'd think that Heerenveen, PEC Zwolle, or Jaap Stam now in charge and doing well. Willem II and Groningen will all be safe, and then you've got, you know, Fortuna Sittard, who've had, you know, a great season so far, but since the winter break they've been awful defensively, leaking goals. Excelsior might this finally be the year that they get caught up. I've been saying it every year that I think they'll go down, and this might be it. So I think, yeah, it's going to go right to the end of the wire, and it's just going to be a case of who can survive the lottery of the playoffs, because there's going to be some tough teams in there. There's going to be Sparta Rotterdam, there's going to be, you know, Den Bosch, that's got a lot of investment at the moment. So I think whoever does finish in the 16th and 17th place is going to have a really hard time of keeping in the top flight.
Just wanted to add to that with the fixtures as well going into the promotion relegation playoffs. Who is at home in the second leg and those types of things. I think I'd like to give a special mention to FC Emmen. I think it will be a tremendous achievement for them in their debut season at the highest level to avoid relegation. I think they have a great chance, and I think Dick Lukien as well. I spoke to Timo Letska when he was assistant at Groningen, and he said that it's thanks to Dick Lukien that I have become a central defender. If it wasn't for him convincing me, with his motivational and man management skills as well, which are well noted with Dick Lukien, I'd like to think that Emmen will get over the line. I do worry for Heerenveen a little bit, because as Mike says with Sam Lammers, a lot of pressure on his shoulders to score the goals, and they've drawn their last 3 matches. And could this well be a season where, although Twente had difficulty financially, where their relegation always seemed like a stay of execution season upon season, could this also be the season where one of the bigger teams, in inverted commas, or seasoned teams at Eredivisie level also drop down?
Yeah, it's likely that we could see that perhaps with a Heerenveen. Even Ardo are down there struggling a little bit as well, and it's always a chance that one of them will just drop in right at the end, but they will have to have some poor form, I think, before the end of the season, considering the amount of teams that are struggling down there. But one team that's pulling away from that mess is Groningen. Danny Bowers has turned it around. He has achieved 4 wins from his last 5 games, and Ludovic Reis in midweek has said that now that Groningen are looking for the European playoffs, they're changing their attentions and they're looking up the table. A far more positive outlook than we certainly thought about them back in November, December. They are getting results though, and they just have this fight about them once more, and they are sometimes riddled with a few mistakes in defence, but in an attacking sense they have changed it. They've turned it all around. Mimou Mahi has linked up well with Ritsu Doan. Ludovic Reis is back to full fitness, which is great to see. And there's just so many positives to say about that club at the moment.
Yeah, and I think they did really well in January to swap out Matteo Cassiera and bring in Kai Sierhus. I think he's a great striker for a club like Groningen, and he puts in a lot of hard work when he's on the pitch. And I think his movement, along with the forward line of Mahi and Ritsu Doan, I think the movement of all 3 of them is going to prove a lot of defences a lot of trouble. You know, it was too much to handle for Feyenoord at the weekend, and you know, they're only 5 points off of Heracles in 7th. You know, you can't rule out that they're going to sneak into the playoffs, and it'll be a tough test for anybody that's in that 4 places.
I also have to eat a little bit of humble pie. I thought Danny Bowles' jump from Kozakker boys to Groningen would be a little bit too much, and I thought I was right at the first half of the season, but they have managed to turn it around. I think it just goes to show how quickly things can change, particularly in the Eredivisie, where 1 minute you're being talked of as a potential relegation candidate, and the next minute you are looking at potential European playoffs. I think the truth is somewhere in between the two as to where they may well finish. At home, it's always a difficult away day, Groningen, not just for the teams that are vying to stay up, but also for the bigger boys as well. But I'll compliment Danny Bowers and his team and his players, because they've turned it around quickly, and they've given themselves a real chance of a potential European playoff spot.
They have indeed. Well, let's see how that goes for the end of the season. I think it's also a matter of time before we start seeing the transfer rumours again for the likes of Doan and Rice to other clubs, bigger clubs in the Eredivisie. Well, I think that's going to be all for this week's Football-Oranje podcast. So, James and Mike, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome anytime.
Brilliant. And I think we'll record another podcast very soon. There's many different things happening in the Dutch football calendar, international wise and domestic wise. So we'll look forward to giving you another podcast very soon. Thanks for listening.
That is back up. That is back up.
Ja!
Daar is hij. Ja! Ja!
Daar is Klaassen. Goal!